up, everybody? Scuff D here, and today we are doing it. We're doing the White Scars card by card. It has been a long time coming, waiting for this thing to get on my list done. I set out to do the card by card reboots following the White Scars release because I felt like they all needed a refresher. We finally made it back around the circle, and we are here again. Sadly, in that entire time, I still do not have the Primarch Jagtai Khan, which makes me sad. So, unfortunately, he's the only card in the card pool I do not have to give my feedback or my input on. However, that is tempered by conversations with other players in the Discord community, in the Reddit community, as well as experience in facing him in game. Now, he did just receive a change to his reckoning. We'll talk about that in just a second, so we'll go ahead and do just that. Let's go ahead, let's get started here. We've got all this text. Let's start with the Warlords. The Warlords, I love the Warlords. I've done videos for all three of the Warlords I have. My most recent one was with Jubal Khan, and I think he's really fun. He's a really good Warlord. As you can see, I've played a lot of games with him. Thinking about taking him out for a spin here soon, although with the new changes, I might be changing my mind, trying out Lorgar or Ingathel. Totally sidetrack. Jubal Khan has got this great standard ability. Can't say it's great. It deals 2 damage to an enemy. If it survives, you deal 2 damage to your Warlord. So there's a trade-off. He does have high initiative. He's got a 2 energy to deal 2 energy. But he also comes with the Sagyr Maizan, and that's really his upsell. Now, it's not listed here for some reason, which I'm not sure why. It should be listed as an all card. But Sagyr Maizan is a 3 energy purple card that gives any troop that you put it on +2 attack with backlash. Put Sagyr Maizan back into your hand. So fluff wise, he's looking for redemption and exile, and him and the other Sagyr Maizan will seek redemption with their deaths. And that's what he's going to do. And he can really put that to use. The later the game goes for Jubal Khan, the more valuable that card gets, especially if you have troops that are on the board. Your opponent cannot afford to let you even have a simple Ambassador Melgator on the board, because you can turn that into a 3/3 that can do damage, and then you get a tactic back that's going to increase the attack of your next troop by +2. And that's not just for a 1 turn, that's a permanent thing. So if you put that on troops that come out flanking and survive, or fast attack and survive, that's a threat that your opponent has to deal with. The more energy you have, the more times you can use that in a given turn, or different ways you can use that in a given turn. It's very, very valuable. In addition to his damage dealing ability, which is not a random, that's a targeted damage that gives you some upsell. Now, the lack of random kind of can come into play with the new duplicitous trait to some degree, but there's so many flanking and fast options, as well as other tactics within the White Scars card pools that we'll see here, that he should really have a lot of support. Jubal Khan is a terrific Warlord. As far as mid-range goes, he can be very aggressive if you want to go that way. He can go with board dealing. I don't think he gets enough play. I don't think he gets enough play because a lot of people see that if it survives, deal 1 damage. Well, why do they want to do that? That's not entirely why you're playing him. You're playing him to play White Scars differently with the Sagyr Maizan. That's really how it comes to it. Now, Jagtai Khan, again, I do not have this Primarch. I would like to have this Primarch so I can finally begin playing and testing with him. He has got the one downside of starting with 1 less energy. Now, that is the first Warlord really in the entire game that has ever had start with less energy. It's always been a speculation that he would go first, and in fact, he has initiative very high. There's only one other Warlord who has initiative very high, and that is the Kalitas Assassin. Has got the very high initiative. Now, notice, she doesn't start with 1 less initiative. She doesn't have a reckoning. She doesn't have 40 health. Is that the only reason? I don't know. I do think it ties into Jagtai Khan's ability, and that is a big thing. For 2 energy, he can gain sneak attack on the next attack this turn, and he can act again. Basically, he can pay 2 energy, gain sneak attack, attack with that sneak attack. That's a nice upsell, and I think if they gave him 2 energy out the gate and him being able to sneak attack right away, it could be very oppressive. So I get that. I understand that. Maybe the ability itself needs to change into a ability very similar to Nikona Shiroken's, where it's every other turn it does something. Maybe instead of gaining stealth, he gains 2 health, and then the next time he gains sneak attack. I don't know. I'm just trying to think outside the box, something to give him a rotating ability. Most people aren't playing him for this ability. This is a nice little upsell. When you play Jagtai Khan, you really are going for his Reckoning, the Warhawk. And this was the recent change. You can take a look at the most recent updates video that I just did, posted that the other day. We're going to be talking about this on the Warp Chatter podcast tonight, as well as all the other changes that took place here. So if you haven't already taken a look at that, take a look at the links down below at the bottom of the video to find out where you can listen to that, because we are trying to do that weekly as a weekly podcast about the game. But we're going to be talking about this here because this makes his Warhawk ability. It used to cost -1 when you control no troops at the end of your turn. Now it's at the start of your turn. That really changes up the way he plays, because initially, the Warhawk Jagtai couldn't keep troops on the board at the end of his turn, which really left him vulnerable and forced to play a lot of tactics if you were going for Warhawk. Now you say, well, why would you go for Warhawk? That shouldn't be your win con. In of itself, it isn't. It's a 3 attack, guaranteed sneak attack. That's it. That's just 3 sneak attack. There's no extra beef there. There's nothing there to go with it. But the support cards within the White Scars card pool, as well as what already exists in the game, is really where this shines. For instance, if you're able to get the Warhawk up there, and then at 10 energy, you give him Apotheosis, then he becomes a 4 attack sneak attack. And then it becomes a 5 attack if you play a second one. Now that's pretty costly, but that's how people were playing him and building him. And I think they were kind of falling into that trap. This is how he should be played to get the maximum value out of him. I think you can play him other ways, but it's not a terribly wrong way, especially if you've got a card like Skilled Rider, which we'll talk about shortly. I'm going to be saying that a lot because a lot of these cards in the White Scars card pool all tie together. White Scars have got this terrific synergy between their cards and their warlords and their troops, and it's really fantastic. Doesn't see enough play, I think, in some instances, because I don't know why. I'll be honest with you. I don't know why. I always have a blast taking the White Scars out. Kenza's another one that has got a purple tactic. He's got Ebb and Flow, but he has a different ability than Jubal Khan. He's got deal 2 damage to a random enemy. If the target dies, you can act again, whether that is attacking or using that ability again. It's very interesting, where you've got a Warlord here who does not have a random damage dealing ability. You've got a Warlord here who does. These have all got high initiative. You're going to see that with the White Scars. They go fast. That's the whole point. There's no downside to that, other than your opponent having the counterattack. That can be problematic sometimes depending on the matchup. So he's got this very static ability. He's going to deal 2 damage. It's random. If you're facing one Warlord, you know who that's going on. That can work for you. Sometimes that can work against you. But he has Ebb and Flow. And Ebb and Flow is a one-time use. Return all friendly troops to your hand. They cost 2 less. Now, you can use this with just 1 troop on the board. You can use this with 3 or 4 troops on the board to get multiple rally effects off, or to replay fast troops. It's very handy if you set your turn up with other cards such as Outriders. You play an Outriders, you play a fast troop, you play Ebb and Flow, you pull all those cards back into your hand. They cost 2 less energy. You play them again on your next turn. The problem is that is a late game style. Kenza definitely has got, he really comes online, his options do late game. Whereas Jubal Khan is more of a mid-range. His Sagir Maizan gets stronger the more the game goes on. but it doesn't have to be late game to be useful. Ebb and Flow, you really need about 7 energy to make it work, and that is enough energy for you to at least play 1 troop, as well as play the Ebb and Flow card and set up your 8 energy turn. But Kenza is fun. He's a good warlord. There's nothing wrong with him. The build that I have with the Kenza deck at the time was a 1-turn kill. It probably could be revised. It was an evolution from the Yasugi, the Targetai Yasugi build. So these two guys I should revisit at some point in time. I think they can play differently from how I built them initially, especially considering the fact that Warp Retreat is not a current card. Kenza and Targetai Yasugi, they can definitely play different ways. I should really go back and expand on them, but sometime. Right now, and when I usually play White Scars, lately it's been Jubal Khan, and one day soon it will be Jagtai Khan. Now, Targetai Yasugi, he's a great character. His ability is very interesting. I kind of tabled him once I got on to Kenza and then to Hibu. He's for 2 energy, draws a card, and if it's a tactic, deal 1 to 3 damage to random enemy. What's not to like? You get card drawing and you get damage. Well, he does have 30 health, and that can be difficult. There are tactics within the White Scars card pool that can prolong his longevity, either by giving him defensive stuff like precognition, or you've got cards that can heal him. You've got lots of tactics out there that exist that could make him beefy or add to the damage that he's dealing out there. And then obviously late game, he could have a full card hand combo with his hand and just unleash a lot. But that low health leaves him susceptible. You don't see him played a lot for that reason, I think. Plus, 2 or 3 turns you're drawing cards. At this stage of the game, you're drawing cards. You might be dealing damage. More times than I care to admit, I've dealt 1 damage instead of 3. And you're just not getting a good exchange there. So he's not as strong as I think the other two, which is a shame because as far as character goes, he's probably the strongest character in the White Scars Legion, besides the Khan up until Terra. Up until before they got to Terra, because that's where his story comes to an end. No spoilers. If I had to rank the Primarchs, the Warlords, just going into it right now, from what I have played, Jubal Khan is at the top of my list. Kenza and then Targetai. If I would like to squeeze Jagtai in there somewhere, I don't know if he would be in front of or behind Hibu. He's a Primarch. That's always fun. I really want to play him outside of the mono Warlord build and actually use troops, and I think the change to his Reckoning gives me that option. But he does start with 1 less energy still, and that is a problem. That can be a very problem, especially when you're facing some factions who, the Dark Angels, for example, have got this wonderful counterattack. Because he's got very fast, they're going to get this counterattack, and they're going to play a Dark Angels troop that costs 1 less. So he's going to have 2 energy on his second turn. The Dark Angels player is going to have 3 energy, and they're going to be able to play stuff like, Phalnix or Israfel right out the gate that he can't entirely react to. And then he's going to spend much, or just even Pelgar Marner without even using the counterattack. They could play Pelgar on turn 1 if they really wanted to. That's just one faction. And then he is behind the curve, not just in terms of energy, but he's got to dedicate cards now to deal with those troops instead of the enemy Warlord. There are some cards within the card pool that are certainly going to assist that if he can stomach it out there and get to that Reckoning. But it's harder, and with certain builds that exist in the game, it's not as forgiving, I think, as it was when he was designed. And I'm not saying when he was released. When he was designed, I think he would have operated perfectly as he is now. But when he was released, and ever since then, the game has been on a different place, a different plateau that he just isn't on. Maybe thematically that works. The Khan is always kind of out there doing his own thing. Speaking about doing their own thing, Kandali Scouts. Rally, deal 1 damage. Pay 1 energy, deal 1 damage. Not return to hand. This is a card that's going to stick around a lot. I've seen these in sealed, and that's probably about all I'm going to see them. I don't expect to see them anywhere else. This is not a great card. It works for what it needs to, but really there are better cards out there. And the White Scars don't really offer anything for low-cost troops, unless they're a flanking troop, or you've already got cards in hand that you're going to do something with. Early game, this is just a throwaway. It's for 1 damage. It's not worth it. I'd pass on that. Skilled Rider is a legendary of contention. It is possibly a shining example of a legendary design for one Warlord. Imagine Jagtai Khan with his sneak attack gaining battle honor, can act again. That's nice. That's nice. But it really shines when he's got that Warhawk out there. If Jagtai Khan can get the Skilled Rider early in the game, or even first turn on the game with his 1 energy, the opponent is going to be hard-pressed, unless they don't run troops at all, to match him. Because once he hits that Warhawk mode, every troop he will fell, and it will cost him nothing, because he'll have sneak attacks. So this is a great legendary for Jagtai Khan. This is not a fantastic legendary for any of the other 3 Warlords. It doesn't do anything for any of them. I leave it out of all of my decks for the other 3. There's no point. I'm not going to be destroying too many troops with my Warlords where I'm going to want to act again and attack again. I think most of them I would like to prolong their life a little bit longer to get to 7 to 8 energy to really activate. Skilled Rider on a Targetai Yasvegi, and he's attacking 2 or 3 attack troops. It's going to drop his health significantly quickly. He's not a Lucius by any means. He's not a Rom. He's not going to heal. So Skilled Rider, good for 1, not good for the others. If you don't have Jagtai Khan, you're not missing anything by not having this. Shgoris. I get this sometimes when I have got like a Pyramid of Photep or a Kaisa Lane. Choose 1 vehicle from your deck and draw it. Now, in of itself, that's okay. That's nice. You're not getting any cost reduction, but there are so many vehicles within the White Scars card pool that this really comes into effect. Outriders is a vehicle. Kumblai Bikes is a vehicle. That's 2. Tag High Attack Bikes is 3. I mean, if you know the White Scars lore, you should know that they have a lot of bikes, right? That's what they do. I mean, I'm still clicking on bikes here, guys. If you know the White Scars lore, you know that's what they have. They've got a ton of bikes and vehicles and speeders and jet bikes. It should be no surprise. The Predator was a nice surprise here. We'll get to that down the road, but you're going to get one of those in your hand. The downside of that is because there are so many vehicles, you're better off just having an abandoned supplies, because your deck might likely contain 8 to 10 vehicle cards. So you're paying 2 energy to draw one of those. Well, why don't you just pay 2 energy to draw one of those at -2 energy? Or you could use Tucholka Engine, which is also an epic neutral, and choose 1 troop from your deck and draw it. And you actually get to choose there. You don't just draw it. So there's a little bit more choice. That card is better. It's not great. It's not great. Again, like I said, I've seen that come up randomly, and that's usually when I use it. But beyond that, I wouldn't use it in a deck. Close Quarters is very nice. It's kind of as a one-of. It's nice. If you build in a certain deck, and this is definitely an archetype for the White Scars, is returning troops to hand. Turn damage troop to its owner hand. If it's a friendly troop, it costs 2 less. Now, when this card first came out, that cost 2 less was just across the board. It didn't have to be just a friendly troop, so it was kind of not worth using on your opponent's troop unless it was to like win the game or seal something out. But now this kind of works as a better, honestly, I can't say better, but a easier conditional Ambassador Melgator. If you do not have Ambassador Melgator, which is the legendary Mechanicum, right? This guy here with the sour face, he's eaten a lemon one too many times. Return a troop with 4 less attack to your hand. You get a troop there. You get a 1/3 health troop for 2 energy, but it's conditional. It's got to have 4 less attack. You could take that Close Quarters and you could have a 1 damage on a unit. of your opponent's choice, regardless of what kind it is, as long as it doesn't have ward, and return it to their hand. And you can also use this on your own troop, and not only are you using this on your own troop, it also is going to reduce the cost of it. And that's if you've got a card that has it like a just for simple, easy, you've used your 3/3 attack bike. He's got 1 health remaining because he attacked the enemy warlord. For 2 energy, use close quarters, you put it back into your hand. That bike is now going to cost 1 energy for you to use it again. That's very nice. You're going to get much use out of your attack bikes. Much use. This is not a bad card. Building a deck around the idea is harder to do, but as a one-of, sometimes it's worth considering. You may or may not eventually find ways to replace it, but I do think when it comes to this or Melgator, I feel like this is an easier fix because Melgator has a little bit more condition to him, especially with some of the changes that we've seen in the game and stat increases from cards like Marks of Chaos. Close Quarters shines a little bit more because its only condition is that the card can't be at full health. Forgotten Sons is another card that kind of returns a troop, although this puts it in your deck. And then it gives it +2/+2, and then you draw a card. So you might get that card back. Thematically, this talks about, the Forgotten Sons. This is exactly what the White Scars are. People really kind of forgot about them. I feel like sometimes people are still forgetting about them, that they can play very well and very fun. But take that same 3/3 bike that we talked about, and now it's a 3/1. Well, for the same energy, if you're not close quarterings, you can put it into your deck, and then it becomes a 5/5, and then you draw a card, increasing the chances that you might have that 5/5 to play later. It doesn't cost 2 less, but it has significantly more stats. I think that this card is in a spot where you could make it work if you had a fast drawing deck. It's a fast drawing deck. I do think that there are some warlords who can make drawing count, where you're able to cycle to get to those vehicles a little bit quicker. It's almost worth pursuing a specific deck build to see if you can make it. This is not a bad card. It's a lot better in events where there is a lot less removal. Going to have troops that you can play this on. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're facing 3 attack warlords all the time, that 3/3 bike isn't going to last. But if you're facing a bunch of 2 attack warlords because it's a sealed event, odds are you're going to get replay value, and when that 5/5 hits, that can be enough sometimes to win the game. I like it. I don't use it all the time. I've used it more in events than anything else, but I'd like to build around that and close quarters. Maybe ebb and flow, but I feel like that's overdoing it. It might be something to throw into a Yaswagi build. But it's not bad. The fact that it gives +2/+2. If it just gave +1/+1, I feel it's too much. But it's giving +2/+2, and you're drawing a card, so you do have a chance of getting that card back. I like that. Now, this is a card that tries to build on that idea of returning troops to your hand, right? As a rally, you get a return a friendly troop to your hand, and you give it +1 attack to your warlord this turn. That's an option. You give one or the other. So this card's going to have, whether you have a troop on the board or not, this guy's going to do something. I don't think he had that give +1/+0 to your warlord this turn. I think that he gained that. And for 1 energy, he can return a friendly troop to your hand. I think there's a design where there's another troop here that actually does something better with this if the 2 are working side by side, but that's so hard to execute that I just don't buy it. I don't dig it. I pass on that. I would rather have a close quarters or Forgotten Son either increasing the stats or reducing the cost, as opposed to having a troop sit out, not take action, and then pay energy to put it back into my hand that doesn't do anything differently for that card. Seems like a waste. Now, Outriders is great. Do you need 2 in your deck? That's a good question, because when it comes to these card by cards, it's really what cards should you keep an eye out for in the shops. And Outriders is definitely one of them. I usually have only 1 of them in my deck, though. Partly because of the decks that I play with the White Scars, they draw fast. Their cards in general draw fast, so they're going to go through those quicker. So you only need 1 for a setup. 2 is either overkill. Usually the Outriders, just putting out one Outriders in conjunction with two fast units is enough to do exactly what you want to do. Even more so if you've used something like Kenza's Ebb and Flow to prep and have a free Outriders and a one cost tag high attack bikes. That right there, then you've got up to 9 more energy to throw down on other fast units and tactics. That's enough to seal the deal. This guy turns him into a 5/3. And then I followed up with a second one I had in my hand that's also a 5/3. That's 10 damage. Then maybe I throw, and that's just 10 damage. 10 damage for 4 energy, if we've used Ebb and Flow accordingly. Now, you could throw down that 10 damage for 8 energy if they cost normal, right? Outriders, attack bikes, and then you use your Warlord's ability to do an additional damage. You're paying 10 damage to do 10 energy to deal 12 damage in bursts. So Outriders are good. They definitely are as a one-up. I don't think you need 2, but you should pick these guys up when they're in the shop. These are a good epic. Korma Voucher Squad. Rally, if opponent has no troops, gain +1/+1. It seems like it's straightforward. It's pretty basic. I don't put them on my deck. They're just not enough there. I would rather save that 2 energy, honestly, for a tactic like Swift Strike or Close Quarters, as opposed to a troop that's just going to be a 3/3 conditionally. So, it's a common. It's okay. It's not great. Ride the Winds. This is a little different setup. If you don't have the Outriders, you certainly can play Ride the Winds. This is going to get +1/+0 to your vehicles in play and in your hand. It won't do anything to the ones in your decks, but it's going to beef them up, what's in your hand, and then you can go to town from there. You could have your 3/3 be a 4/3 out the gate, and then maybe you draw an Outriders, you play the Outriders, and then your 4/3 is now a 6/3. It has its applications. It's not going to do you any good if you don't have any vehicles in play in hand, though, so keep that in mind. Swift Strike is great. That's just, you need 2 of those in your deck. There's no reason. It's 2 energy to deal 2 damage, and if it target dies, you draw a card. There's no downside to that. You can target anything that doesn't have ward with this, and there's so many troops that are going to have 2 health at some given point in time. You can use this late game to end games for that 2 extra damage, or just stacking it on and drawing a card to get to your next combo. Swift Strike is good. It's flexible. It's a common. It lives up to the creed. 2 for 2. Good card. Put it in your deck. Captain Akeem. Now here we get into another legendary that some would argue is conditional or not so great. He's got this resolution ability, which creates a copy of a tactic in the enemy hand at your hand. He is not as good as Jubal Starsight by any means. Jubal Starsight, copies something, any card that's in your opponent's deck. If your opponent doesn't have any tactics in their hand, Hakeem is not going to be doing anything for you. However, if they have a single tactic in their hand, it can sometimes be enough to change the course of the game. At the very least, make Captain Hakeem a target for a turn or 2. Early game, your opponent has got a Supply Lines, which is a great card for the White Scars, or a Manifest Destiny that they're hanging on to. Maybe it's a Gore Child, or a Mercy and Forgiveness, or Raven's Talons, or Vengeful Spirit. Early game, late game, as long as they've got a tactic, he's going to poke and he's going to take that information. Your opponent's not going to want you to have that information, and they're going to want to get rid of him. But it's a gamble. He's okay. I've got him in my Jubal Khan deck, and I never regret playing him. But I don't play him all the time. I don't feel like the faction revolves around him. He's just kind of a detraction, if anything. If you don't have him, you're not missing out. Because even if he doesn't get a tactic, he's just a 2/3 body on your next turn, and that's all he'll ever do for you. Whereas these guys here, at least if they're not taking tactics, they can give themselves +2/+0. I'm not a huge fan of the helmet there. It kind of looks like it belongs in a different franchise, but I don't like troops that pay energy to buff themselves and that's all they do. Like, they don't have can act again. Now, I get that this is a common, and it shouldn't have that, but you're going to be wasting time and turns increasing the attack of this troop without attacking with this troop. In the 2 turns that it would take for you to increase this troop to a 6 attack and then attack with it, you could just attack and deal 4 with it straight out the bat, and that's if your opponent didn't do anything to try to remove this troop. I dislike this. These guys have been a waste. I skip over them every time in deck construction. I don't even look at them. They're just not great. Kumbaya bikes is a rare, and it's better. And I don't include Kumbaya bikes either, but I would look at them more than I would at that common. Not for rarity's sake, but just for the fact that this card has flank. This can do something for me. As a rally, it gains +2/+0, making it a 4/3 flank on the turn that it comes in on. That's nice. And if I've added something like Outriders or ride the winds, then I've made it even stronger on the emergence. So yeah, Kumbaya bikes is nice. Flanking is always good. I don't have anything downside to say. It's hard. I think that the only downside I have to say for this card is it's hard to squeeze in sometimes because of all the other options that the faction has, especially if you're looking for flanking units. The White Scars have no shortage of flanking units. Quick reaction. We're getting into this other card that is another must-have. We've got it's 3 energy. Give precognition to a friendly unit until your next turn, and then you draw a card. 9 times out of 10, you're going to give precognition to your Warlord, and this allows that to give precognition to your Warlord. The game has a history of turns and games being decided by a timely precognition on your Warlord. This is a great card. This is a rare. It is a game saver. It is a turn sometimes necessary to set up your Kenza or your Jubal Khan combos. It definitely can buy Khan the time for his reckoning, more so now than ever. 2 of absolutely is a must. Skyfire Thunderhawk. You could argue that this could be a 2 of. I don't know. I do have 2 of them usually in most decks because 3 for 3. It's 3 damage. On any target. There's what's not to like. 3 energy for 3 damage. Or you can return a friendly troop to your hand and it costs 2 less. And I've used that a couple times. I've used it for that return a troop to your hand a couple times. Usually I'm using it for 3 for 3. Do I need to have 2 of it in my deck? I don't know. I just like damage. I'm not gonna lie, that's my unbiased opinion. I just like dealing damage. But it's a good epic. It's a solid epic. It does 2 different things, and it does them well. You're either going to get your return on any target from your opponent, or you can use it to restore a troop to your hand, as well as cost reduction, which is nice. Tagging how to tie attack bikes. I've used these in about 3 of the scenarios that I've given so far in the card by card. I should go without saying that a 3/3 for fast that's a common is terrific, especially for this faction that thrives on going fast and maxing out the stats or giving bursts to their troops. Yes, Tagging High Attack Bikes is definitely a 2 of in your deck. These are common too. It's so easy to pick up Swift Strike and Tagging High Attack Bikes in quick reaction. Yeah, you won't regret it. Now, Tempestuous Orders, I've seen this once. I'm not a fan of the artwork here. I'm not a fan of the art image here for the Khan. It looks a little bit chonky here for me. It could just be his armor or the angle of the picture, but I like this one a lot better. Yeah, Tempestuous Orders, give your troops sacrifice, return to your deck, is cool. Kind of. Draw a card. But you have to have troops, you have to have multiple troops to use that with. Then you're just putting them back in your deck to draw over again. That actually seems to me to be a lot worse than the old Resilience, which was, give your troops sacrifice return to your hand. Like even the salamanders can do that better. I dislike this card. It's not something I would play or want to see play. For the Khan is decent. Again, here's another option if you don't have the Outriders, or better yet, you have the Outriders, but your timing is different. You don't have any other cards to play from your hand with them. For the Khan, it gives +2/+0 to your units this turn. Now, they've got to be on the board. If they're in your hand, they're not going to gain that benefit, so you want to make sure you play any of your fast troops first before you play for the Khan. But what's nice about this is this also includes your Warlord. So at the very least, if you already have one troop on the board, you're paying 4 energy to give your Warlord and that troop +2/+0. For Jagatai Khan builds, definitely feels like at least considering whether or not you choose to use it or not. If you've got a lot of other troops in your deck for him, absolutely. If you don't, maybe not. But if you're going with, I want to build a lot of troops, or I want to have some resilience, it's worth including. Now, I don't put it in my Hibu Khan because Hibu Khan has got the Sagar Maison, and that's cheaper. It's only for 1 unit, but it's continuous, and I don't have to have a burst. But if you've ever played the Sons of Horus, or any other faction that has got a effect like Frontal Assault that gives you mass pluses to your troops this turn, and you do math, and you've got three units on the board, and you add 3 times 2 is 6 extra damage on top of whatever else that you're doing. Yeah, that can do a lot. That can win the game if you catch them when they're not looking. So this is a good tactic for a common, but it's just, you gotta look at to see if you're going to be using it or not. If you're building the deck around that, or if you find often your games are decided by having troops on the board, but you miss a little bit of punch, that could be the punch that you're looking for. Now, Gabash Veterans, this is that card that I was talking about where if you return a friendly troop to your hand, it does something. But it's just one of. It deals 3 damage to a random enemy. I think before it was dealing like 2 damage. They increased the damage dealt, which is nice. And it's when you return a friendly troop to your hand or deck, which is better considering the fact that you got something like Tempestuous Orders, right? You're still returning troops to your deck. You're still not doing anything once they're in your hand. You've got to replay them again. He doesn't have anything that prevents him from being destroyed. He's only a 3 attack. 5 health is okay. No survivor, no ward. It just feels lackluster. And if you're building, I'll be honest with you, if you're building your deck strategy around using a combo with 1 troop on the board, that's a lot harder to do than you think. It's a lot harder to do, especially when the ability itself is kind of a reward over multiple turns and uses as opposed to a one-time situation. For instance, and just by comparison, if you are going for a 1-troop strategy, often you can take a look at the good old-fashioned Tyranthicos veterans from the the Iron Warriors. You guys get these out there, they survive, and then you give them the old harsh discipline, and then they get all angry and they get bloodthirst and they do like 22 damage in a turn. And you get your use out of them. Well, conversely, this guy here is going to have to stay out there alive, and you're going to have to play and return 7 different troops to deal 21 damage. That's just harder to do without any other tools to help assist with that. If there were 2 or 3 other troops that had similar abilities, then there would be a little bit more synergy to make that kind of niche deck an option. But as it is, it's really hard to build around these guys for that ability. If they get squeezed in there and you get it to trigger once or twice, that's fantastic, but it's just not going to happen. You're better off using a card like Golden Star Rhino, which is going to return friendly to your hand. I mean, you can use them in the same deck, but this is going to be better for you because this has got frontline as well as a heal 3 option to your Warlord. And usually I take the heal 3 to my Warlord, but sometimes it's nice to use a Melgator, return it to my hand, use a Melgator again, and then go from there. And then maybe play Ebb and Flow, and then pull those both back up and have those costs reduct. Yeah, this is just a great card. Probably, even though it's only a 2 attack and a 5 health. Oh, it's hard to say. Is this the best Rhino out there? I think it's tied. Honestly, if I had to, right now, just out of the blue, I think it's tied with Obsidian 02, which just puts troops into play. Hard toss up. Hard toss up. It might slightly edge out Obsidian only for the simple fact that it has Rally. And you're going to get, you don't have to wait a turn to get one of those benefits. But it's such a tight call. It really is, because I like those both. This is a good card. Korma Thunderhawk, another great card. 4 energy, 4 damage. If it dies, draw a vehicle from your deck. Great artwork too, this like classic comic book look. I dig it. What's not to like? I'm going to say that a few more times here. I feel like it. 4 damage, 4 energy. Possible drawing troops from your deck. Yeah, this is a good card. This can help you win games too. Sometimes just having 6 energy at the end of the game, you play a Swift Strike, you play a Thunderhawk, that's 6 energy, you attack with your Warlord, that's 8 energy, you've won the game. That happens way more times than you know, because tactics dealing damage are awesome. Silverblade Speeder is a troop that deals damage. It's fast. It's a 3/4. It's not a 3/3, but it has Battle Honor. Return to your deck and draw a card. So you might get this card back again. Maybe you'll draw a card that was put into your deck with the Forgotten Sons. It's hard to say. There's no negatives here. It's a fast troop. I think the only time that would be negative is if your opponent baits you into using it early and you never see this card again. But that's hard to do, considering how much drawing that the White Scars have. I really like this card. It works with the OTK builds that I did. It works with Jubal Khan and Sagir Maizan. At 7 energy, I can throw out a 5 attack fast that can go back to my deck. Now, if I put the Sagir Maizan on the Silverblade Speeder and he goes back into my deck, I'm going to lose that. So that is something to keep in mind. I make a note of that in the video, I believe. But this is just a good troop. Yes, that's a 2 of. I won't regret it. Vendali Bikes. So these guys here, here's what's interesting. So Kumblai Bikes come out. They're a 4/3. They've got flank, but they don't have sneak attack. These guys are a 4/2. They have flank. They get sneak attack once. I don't know which is better or which is worse. They've got 1 less health. I don't know. I'll be honest with you, I really don't know. I don't think you could go wrong with either of them, but I think if you don't have Vendali, you pick Kumblai, and if you don't have Kumblai, you pick Vendali, at least as a 1 of, to give yourself some flanking options. Here's another guy who's got flank. Look at this guy, he's a 4/4. And he can gain 6. He can be a +2/+0 when he comes out on the turn that he is. So he's a 6/4 flanker, which is pretty gnarly. I use him a little bit less, I think, just because he doesn't have sneak attack than I've used Vendali Bikes for 1 energy less. But I don't feel like there's anything wrong with this guy. I really don't. Like, especially if you're facing Warlords that rely on a lot of troops, especially the Defenders of Caliban, Canis Vertex, Word Bearers, Ultramarines, Salamanders. Flanking is one of the best. I can't say the best. It is in the top category level of traits, and you're not going to regret it. The fact that it gains an additional +2/+0 on the turn that you use it is nice, because if it survives, you still have a 4/4. But if you need it to flank and deal 6 damage, it can do that for 5. So that's good. Now, here's an epic that is not great. This guy seems cool. He's a 5/4. Okay. I think initially he was a 5/3. Gains +2/+0 while your opponent has no troops, and he has first strike. So if your opponent has no troops, he's a 7/4. But that's it. This is just nothing fantastic here whatsoever. This guy doesn't do anything. If your opponent has troops, he's got first strike. If your opponent doesn't have troops, he's got 2 extra attack. Doesn't have a rally effect. Doesn't do anything else. I've never used him. I don't put him in my decks. I would much rather play with a flanking unit. He does not have flank. He just has first strike. Or a unit that does something for my Warlord, guaranteed the turn it comes in, then I would rather play with this Epic. You can pass on this guy and you will not be missing anything, I promise you. Now, Anagol Veterans, we're talking about the troop build for Jagtai Khan, and Apotheosis, right? 10 Apotheosis, and you give your Warlord, +1 attack. Well, what if you had 2 Anagol Veterans dropping in beside your Warlord at the end of the game, giving him +2 attack, as well as 2 4/5 bodies on the board? I feel like that's a better strategy. And again, I don't have Jagtai to test that concept, but I would like to. The fact that these guys up the attack of your Warlord is nice. The only card that can up the attack of your Warlord, we'll see that one shortly here, but this is just a good card. It's targetable, it can be dealt with, although I figure if you get to that stage in the game, especially in the Warhawk mode, odds are your opponent has exhausted some resources against other vehicles that you've thrown out there, so these guys might actually stick around a little bit longer. This is another great one to support your Warlord here. The Stormseer Uligai heals 2 when your Warlord when it attacks and deals 1 to 3 damage. And I have seen games, much to my dismay, when my opponent drops a Stormseer Uligai and uses the Warhawk to kill 3 of my units, heal 6 to his Warlord, and then attack me and heal another 2. That's 8 health that he recovers just for playing a troop and killing my stuff. This is a great card. I use it in my Jubal Khan deck as well. It's a target. It takes heat off of your Warlord. It heals. At the very least, you're losing nothing by attacking with your Warlord. And if he sticks around, he's got an activated ability, so he doesn't even have to lose his health. You can just throw out little side bolts of 1 to 3 damage and then attack to your Warlord, and he's still healing your Warlord. This is a good card. It's a rare. If you are going with a little less tactic drawing, like Targetai, if you're not going to Targetai, if you're doing Kenza or Jubal Khan, please consider Stormseer Uligai. These guys are really fun. Stormseer's Wisdom is a neat card. It's healing, right? You draw 3 cards for every tactic draw and heal 2 to your Warlord. So it's potentially 5 to draw 3 and heal 6, potentially. It's also 5 to draw 3 and heal 0. There's so much card drawing, it can work against you sometimes. Now, this is a key card when I was doing the OTK build. Key card, healing and drawing cards. There was nothing to not like about that. And if you're playing Yasuegi, you definitely would want at least one of these in your deck for that healing purposes. But, as I've said, there's so many good troops here. There's so many good troops here that it's hard to justify 2 of these without the expectation that it's not going to do much for you. Now, if you're playing the old solo Warlord with a lot of tactics, then yeah, you'd want 2 of these in there, but I really think those days are over. I don't think you should go that route. I think you should include one of these because healing 2 to 6 is nice. That's never a bad thing. But I think over reliance on these isn't going to get you anywhere. Now, Targetai's Sacrifice, this card here, cool artwork. Definitely a card of contention. A lot of people, a lot of salty about this card when it first came out because this returned all troops to their owner's decks, reduced their cost to 0, and that was it. That was it. There was no for each enemy troop deal 2 damage to your Warlord. That wasn't even an add-on there. It was very problematic. Your opponent would get out 2 big beefy troops. You could put out 2 fast troops. Everybody goes back to their decks. Your opponent could draw those troops again and play them for free on their next turn. Happened to me quite a few times. On the other hand, they might not. And you could draw your stuff and play it for free. It was a really toss-up of a card. I think when they changed it, the change is pretty severe. Deal 2 damage to your Warlord. And you really have to make that decision if you're going. Like, I include one of these at least, just as a optional, like, last ditch board clear. I need one more turn, please, and I'm willing to take damage for it. And if I take up to 10 damage, but I stave off 15 to 20 damage from troops that my opponent had on the board, and I can still live, it might be worth it. On the downside, if I'm putting back 6 troops in my opponent's deck, I'm taking 12 damage, and odds are high that one of those 6 cards could be the next card that they draw, especially if your opponent has low cards in their deck remaining. So I feel like when they changed it, the deal 2 damage really hurts more than it should. It should deal 1 damage, but it is what it is. It's still very useful when it needs to be, but it is something that you don't just play willy-nilly. You've really got to give some thought to it. When do you play it? Who are you facing? Why do you play it? What should you save it and play it for? But it can certainly buy you a turn, and sometimes for the White Scars, that's all they need. And if you read Pathway to Heaven, Pathway to Heaven, or Path to Heaven, fantastic book. That's really kind of the entire theme of the book is the White Scars need one more turn. They just need one more turn. Just give them one more turn. And I tell you, I was surprised by how much I enjoyed that book, because Scars was okay, but Targetai really, I can't say Targetai, Path to Heaven really upped the tension a lot. And just a plug for that book. It's a good book. White Tiger Dao, guys. This is a great legendary. If your warlord is attacking, hey, is there a warlord that attacks with sneak attack? Huh. He's got 3 attack. You mean this guy could be a 5 attack sneak attack on my turn? What if he was higher? Huh. Okay. There's a way that he could attack? You don't say. Are you seeing the pieces? The pieces all come together here, ladies and gentlemen. If the Jagtai Khan has the pieces, has 2 pieces, he doesn't even need to have any of these other pieces. If he has Skilled Rider and the White Tiger Dao, Jagtai Khan can end games. He is one of, if not the best Primarch duelist. Putting Mortarion to the test, and a ferocity that cannot be matched, or is hard pressed to match. White Tiger Dao is a great card for its cost. It's fair. It does +2/+0 just during your turn, but when you're attacking for 4 or higher, that is a lot of damage, especially if your opponent cannot respond or deal with it. So great card, definitely a legendary to pick up in the shop. Even if you don't have Jagtai Khan, I use it in my Hibu Khan. I'll definitely be squeezing it into my revised Kenza. Likely not my Targetai, only because he has that low health and I don't plan on attacking with him directly. But for warlords that I'm going to be using to attack directly, White Tiger Dao is a great way to close out that game. Iron Steed bikes. Now we're getting to this part where, these guys are 6 energy cost. They're common. They've got flank. Yet again, this is troop number 4 with flank. Rally, if your opponent has no troops, gain fast. So it's a conditional fast. We're really getting to the point now where there's just so many vehicles that flank or fast. You have to pick and choose. These guys are 6 costs, so it's a little bit hard to combo them effectively with something like the Sagir Maison or the Ebb and Flow, but not entirely impossible for them to not be used well with Outriders or something like Ride the Winds. So they're good. They're useful. They do something. But the fast is conditional. The flank is okay. I go one step further. I go one rarity higher, I'll be honest with you, and I go with the Kaisen Speeder. When we get to that in just a sec, you'll see it's a one rarity higher, but I feel like it's better in how it works for what I need it to do 9 times out of 10. I love the 6 health. That's fantastic. But typically, just the cost and with everything else that the White Scars already have available to them, it's so hard for me to squeeze these guys into the deck list. Jubal Khan is not hard to squeeze in the deck list. Look at that armor. Look at that artwork. He's the laughing killer. He's just always laughing, that guy. Rally, deal 3 damage. That can hit your opponent's Warlord. That's great. 2 energy. How about deal 5 damage and return to your hand? That can hit your opponent. This guy becomes target number 1 as minute he hits the board because he's a 5/6, which is not nice. But your opponent knows that you're going to pay the 2 energy to deal 5 damage, either to your Warlord, to his Warlord, to his troops, whatever it is, and then you're going to deal another 3. If he's left uncontested, he can deal 3 and then 5 and then 3 and then, I mean, like, that's 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8. Your opponent cannot let that happen, so they're going to go with him. Even if he does 3 damage once and he takes 1 to 2 cards from your opponent to deal with, he has done his job. He is distracted. This is a good legendary. This is an example of a solid legendary. Has multiple uses, but really one purpose, and it does it well. I like this card. Another solid must pick up when it's in the shop. Now, Kaisen Speeder, this is the rare that I was talking to you about. This does not have flank. This has fast without a condition. However, it does have a rally condition where it gains cleave 2 this turn, and that's where I like it. This is a 4/5, unlike a 4/6, so it has 1 less health. But often I use that cleave 2 in conjunction with my Warlord and or tactics to do the same effect that a flanking 4 attack would do. And then I still typically get to keep a 3 to 5 health troop on the board to use as I please. Kaisen Speeder is a great rare. Not overly costed for what it does. Very good. Again, another good card. Fast damage, cleaving damage, rally damage. These guys do a lot, and there's so many choices to choose from. Sometimes that's the problem. That's the problem, Martha. I don't know where that came from. Eben Keshig. I don't use these guys. I've seen them shine in events, in several events where these guys were great stealth removal. These guys are much better than the Skitarii Protector. They're 6/8 with frontline. And then as a rally, a random ammo stealth loses. That's cool. They're costly though, and I'd rather play fast stuff at that speed. I just don't use them in standard play. In events, they have certainly surprised me. Sometimes I forget what they do, that they have this random enemy with a stealth loses it, but they do that. And then on top of that, they're a frontline. But in building your deck, you're probably going to pass over them off of stuff that does fast or widespread damage, and you'll just won't find a place for them. So if you do have them in your deck and you don't have any other better options, put them on that shelf where soon to be replaced, or once you get a better option. Golden Keshig in and of itself is a better option. Now that's a higher rarity, I understand that, but this is flank, battle on, or can act again, which is nice by itself. But the fact that it's a 7/6, Golden Keshig is a key to any White Scars player buying out yet another turn. These guys can easily clean an entire board full of Jaegers and still be alive, as well, and threatening your opponent's Warlord. Or they could just deal out and kill 2 to 3 troops on a flanking action for 7 energy, which is a lot more accurate and easier to control and than trying to roll defensive satellites for 5 energy sometimes. Golden Keshig is a really good card. There's no downside to it other than its cost. And if its cost is an issue for you, you could always roll abandoned supplies or supply lines. Although with the amount of vehicles in the White Scars card list, supply lines feels like it's okay. It's definitely not going to not draw a card. It's going to work for you. But, I mean, just put your hand in the bucket and draw something. Stormlance is cool. Stormlance is good. I have got one of those in my deck too, because at the very least, it destroys an enemy troop for 6 energy. That's what it is. It says it's cost 7, but if your opponent has 1 enemy troop, it costs 6. So it's a 6 energy hard removal that could very easily end up costing 1 if your opponent has got a board full of troops. So it's got a lot of applications, but the fact that it's just simply a hard removal, and then you throw in all the other flanking that the White Scars have got, as well as a card like Targetized Sacrifice. The White Scars have got ways to clear the board. Stormlance is a very strong card. You don't need to have two of it in your deck, but you should consider having at least one of it in your deck. Hard removal is always a good thing to have. Speaking of hard removal, here's another guy. It does hard removal. He destroys a damaged enemy troop. Now, it's a little different than Stellak, right? From the Ultramarines. The Ultramarines, they've got that courage. Still like Atheon, destroys a random enemy troop as a courage effect. It has to be courage. Well, this guy, his conditional is it just has to be damaged. It's not even random. Like, you get to pick it. So if you know what troop it is that you've damaged or you want to get rid of, and they've got, just a nick on their shoulder, Selmig comes in and takes off that arm and that head to go with it. This guy is a surprise sometimes to people, because typically with White Scars, I think a lot of people forget that they've got some strong 8+ cost cards that aren't fast but are still very effective. And you drop an 8/9 body on the board, get rid of one of their troops off the board, and you're going to make them sweat. This is a great legendary. Now, in terms of legendaries, as we've gone through all of the legendaries, the number one legendary that I would say for the faction is Jubal Khan. Honestly, because he's a troop, he's going to be good in any deck. He's going to have a rally damage effect. He's great. He's adequately costed. Your second is probably White Tiger Dao. And then your third would be Samakai. And it's the second and third are a close call. I won't lie. I think White Tiger Dao is a little bit more aggressive. And if you're not playing with an aggressive Warlord, if you're playing with more of a sit back style, then Selmig is going to do you more good. But because he's an 8 energy, you may not use him every game. Whereas Jubal Khan, you're going to get to 6 energy at least most games, unless it's just a total blowout. You'll have use for him. You can make use for White Tiger Dao, and sometimes that can buy you or close the gap that you need to. And then I would probably put Hakim and then Skilled Rider in terms of what is pressing. Hakim is okay, as I said. Skilled Rider, you don't need to have. You're not going to miss anything without some of those cards, but having Jubal Khan as in your toolbox is going to really help your games. Thunderhead is another card with a rally damage effect, right? This is another 8 energy thing, rally. Deal 4 damage. It's to a random enemy. So if your opponent only has a Warlord, we know where that's going. And then you have this 8/6 body that they have to deal with. Jubal Khan is better in the fact that it's targeted and you recoup it, and it comes out 2 turns earlier. But that's not anything to scoff at. An 8/6 with 4 damage, either killing a troop sometimes or hurting the Warlords pretty significantly. Yeah, I like this card. It's way better in events. In sealed in standard play, I prefer just to go with the hard removal versus the random damage. But if you don't have Selmig and you don't have Golden Keshig, consider Thunderhead. If you're just starting into the White Scars here and you want to figure out what should I have as my game-ending stuff, this will help you get there. Uhan Solban will also help you get there. This is awesome artwork. As a Contemptor Dreadnought. Frontline. Okay. Always use Frontline. Dreadnought and Frontline. I like the sounds of that. He's got Rally. Give -2/-0 to all enemies until your next turn. And that includes your opponent's Warlord. And that means on your turn, so you can attack with all your stuff that you've got on the board, or your Warlord if you want, and take less damage. And then on their turn, they're going to sit there. And if they don't have a way to get rid of this guy, he's going to come at them on the next turn, as well as everything else in your arsenal. This is very nice. Now, yes, he's a vehicle, so he's susceptible to Melt-A-Bomb, Ursa Malevolus, other things that deal with vehicles, but this faction is full of vehicles, so the odds are very high that if your opponent has had a crack grenade or a time melt-a-bomb or something like that, that they might have used it on some of these vehicles already. Wuhan Soban doesn't come out that often. I have him in my Hibu Khan deck, and I think every time I play him, my opponents have a visible pause. Um, he's just as a one-of, just to give me, again, a way to protect my Warlord just a little bit, lower my opponent's attacks. This is really great if you're facing a War Leader who has already used his Conquerors, and your opponent's Angron is down to like 1 or 2 attack because of this effect, and then he has to attack this 8-9 front line. It's happened a couple times, enough for me to be to derive some satisfaction from it. So Oban Sohan is a good epic. He's not a must-have, though. Make no mistake, he's not a must-have. Now, when it comes to epics, we've talked about all the epics here. Aside from Warlords, who you need to have, you will not regret having Hibu Khan or Kenza. I would probably say Outriders is your number 1 epic, followed shortly by Golden Keshig, and then it's a toss-up between either the Skyfire Thunderhawk or Stormseer's Wisdom. They both do good things. You won't regret having at least one of them in your deck, but they're not going to swing games. And then I would probably say Wuhan and Agatai. And Agatai is like 3 degrees less than Wuhan. Like, Wuhan is much better than Agatai is. Like, in terms of what epic should you search for in the shop. If that makes sense. I hope that does. Now, Planeslord, we get into this whole classic 10 energy land raiders that just sit there. This guy does something at least, though, right? He's got shield, and when you put him play a troop, he gives +2/+1. That's a permanent buff. Like, in terms of all of the 10 cost troops that are out there for factions, this is probably in the top 3. I think maybe the Custodians have got one that does it a little bit better. And not without necessarily giving out troops, but just like you relentless drawing Custodians from your decks. And then the Ultramarines have got a fantastic Ardentian. Create 2 Ultramarines of Astartes in your hand and give them flank. That's a great 10 cost card. But a 10 cost with shield and buffing up all the troops that you play, it's like a Outriders on steroids. Now the downside is, if you play the Planeslord, he has to survive a turn before you get to use that. So if he doesn't have Ward or Survivor, you may not make it that point. And if you've gotten to 10 energy and you're relying on a combo for your next turn, you're not in a great place. So pass on Planeslord. Wuhan, Thunderhead, Selmic, all good in varying degrees. Planeslord, it's a pass. Now, last but not least, let's talk about the counterattack for the White Scars. Because the White Scars have got high energy for all their Warlords, and Jagtai Khan has got very high energy, that means very, very, very few turns are they going to see this counterattack. She gets +1/+0 to a friendly unit this turn. It's very flexible. It's very, very useful. You can give it to your Warlord. You can give it to a troop. 1 extra attack. That's not anything bad, especially if you've got a Warlord. Let's say Jagtai versus a Jagtai match, a mirror match, where he faces a Kalitas Assassin, and then he gets into Warhawk mode. He's got his counterattack. He's got that additional +1 attack. Or maybe you've got White Tiger Dao on a Hibu Khan who went second. Now he can have 5 attack on his next turn. And that's not counting you throwing down an Anagol Veterans next to him, or healing for 2 with Stormseer Iligai. It's a good counterattack. But because they have high initiative, the odds of you seeing it and or implementing it are not that often, and so you shouldn't really factor that into your strategies. If you get it, you get it. That's great. But it's not something that you can build upon. Instead, if you're playing the White Scars, one thing that you should build upon is the idea that if I'm facing my opponents, they're going to have the counterattack. And if so, what is that counterattack? How do I prepare for it? If I'm facing the Raven Guard, their counterattack is, stun an enemy. I gotta be prepared for that. If I'm facing the Ultramarines have a very flexible counterattack. It either heals or damages, right? If I'm facing the Dark Angels, as I showed, they have the ability to reduce the cost of their troop. So do the Word Bearers. How do I prepare for that? What cards do I include in my deck to go against that that matchup, or when I see them on the load up screen, what do I need to be thinking? Okay, these are the cards I need to keep in my hand. Do I want to have a 4-cost, 5-cost card in my hand if it's not going to do me any good right out the gate, or do I want to have some tactics that draw damage? Or maybe I do want to have a flanking unit right out the gate to get rid of, so when they use their counterattack to lower the cost of a troop, I get rid of that troop right away, and they've invested cards in a card that isn't there. So you really got to think about those things a little bit more. It's a different way of looking at the counterattack, but because the faction itself has that high initiative, I think it's very important to do so. So that is it for me, guys. My gosh, we have made it through the White Scars card by card. I hope that has been educational, informational, inspirational. I enjoy doing these videos. If you like this video and you haven't already subscribed, please do so. I appreciate the subscriptions. I appreciate the feedback, the comments. If there is a warlord that you use here, that you've got other thoughts on the White Scars card by cards, let me know what's working for you, what isn't working for you. Have you gotten a chance to try out the new Jagtai Khan following the changes? I haven't, and I'm envious of you if you have. I mean, jealous in a good way, but man, I really want to. I am chasing him. He is the one card I don't have in the game right now, and when I get him, I will be joyous. Not as joyous as when I get all the Imperial Fist cards, but that's a different story for a different video. I hope this has been helpful. If you've got anybody else that you know, either in your lodge or as a friend who is into the White Scars and who would like to play this game or like to try out the White Scars, take a look. Now, the White Scars is a faction, as I said, giving you some of my thoughts here at the end here. The White Scars is a faction. Have great synergy. They really do. They are not a difficult faction to step into and play. You can get a lot of fun out of them. You really can. They're not flexible. I think their biggest weak point, honestly, with the White Scars is frontline, which harkens way back to something that's been around the game. If you're facing the Death Guard with White Scars, it is going to be a hard matchup because there's a lot of frontline at your enemy's disposal, and it'll make setting up combos like Outriders and your fast bikes and your flank stuff a lot harder to do. Now, it's not impossible, although with the recent changes to the Death Guard, it is harder. So please keep that in mind and play accordingly. Maybe pack in a couple of breaches, or some widespread damage, or consider every now and then that one turn that you might have to play Targetized Sacrifice. Kind of thematic that you would play Targetized Sacrifice against a Death Guard player. Alright guys, that is it for me. I hope this has been good for you. Let me know what you think in the comments. And until next time, keep playing Legions.